Picture this. You're at your dream wedding in Switzerland, surrounded by ambassadors and dignitaries, when your new husband slaps you during your first dance, in front of 200 guests. What happens next will shock you, because this isn't just any bride. This is Rebecca Harrison, daughter of a U.S. ambassador, and she's about to turn the tables on her abusive CEO husband in ways he never saw coming. What starts as a fairy tale wedding becomes an international incident when Rebecca discovers her charming new husband has been running a criminal empire, targeting women with powerful families. But Marcus Wellington made one fatal mistake. He underestimated the woman he thought he could control. This is the true story of how diplomatic immunity became a weapon against domestic violence, how one woman's worst day became the catalyst for saving hundreds of others, and why Marcus is now serving 22 years in federal prison while Rebecca runs a foundation that has revolutionized international law. Stay with me for the next hour as we uncover how Rebecca Harrison went from victim to victor, using the very connections her abuser tried to exploit to bring down his entire network. Trust me, you won't see this ending coming. The crystal champagne flute shattered against the marble floor like a gunshot. 200 guests fell silent in the grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel. The orchestra stopped mid-note. Rebecca Harrison Wellington steadied herself against the head table, her 6-month belly pressing against the ivory silk of her wedding dress. Her cheek burned where Marcus's hand had connected. "Did you just—" Rebecca's voice caught in her throat. She touched her face, feeling the heat spread across her skin. The same protective gesture every woman makes when shocked by sudden violence, checking if it really happened, making sure she wasn't imagining things. Marcus Wellington straightened his black tuxedo jacket. His face showed no remorse, only irritation that she had questioned him during their first dance. "Becca, you're being dramatic," he said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. It was barely a tap. But it wasn't barely a tap. The sound had echoed off the crystal chandeliers. The force had turned her head. Her diamond earring had fallen to the floor. Ambassador Thomas Harrison was already moving through the crowd. Rebecca's father had spent 30 years in diplomatic service. He knew how to read a room. He also knew when international incidents were about to begin. "What did you do to my daughter?" Thomas's voice carried the authority of someone who had negotiated with heads of state. Marcus smiled. That charming smile that had won over Rebecca's friends. The same smile that had convinced her to ignore the red flags during their engagement. "Sir, with respect, this is between me and my wife," Marcus said. "She's just overwhelmed. Wedding day emotions." Rebecca stared at her new husband. 30 minutes ago, she had been Mrs. Marcus Wellington. Now she wondered who this man really was. The mysterious phone call during their first dance played in her mind. Marcus had stepped away to answer. When Rebecca asked who it was, he had grabbed her wrist, hard enough to leave marks under her tennis bracelet. "Who was calling you?" she had asked again. That's when his hand had struck her cheek. "Nobody important," he had said, but his phone had been buzzing all day, the same number, over and over. Rebecca's maid of honor, Jennifer Mitchell, reached the head table first. Jen had been Rebecca's roommate at Georgetown. She knew Rebecca better than anyone. She also knew that Rebecca never made scenes. Rebecca was the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed things over. "Becca, honey, let's get you some air," Jen said softly. She positioned herself between Rebecca and Marcus. "I'm fine," Rebecca said automatically. The response every woman gives when she's not fine at all, when she's trying to minimize what just happened, when she's hoping everyone will pretend they didn't see. But 200 people had seen, including 3 ambassadors, the Swiss foreign minister, and Rebecca's grandmother, who was 92 years old and had survived worse things than Marcus Wellington. "You are not fine," Grandmother Rose said, her voice cutting through the murmur of confused guests. "And this is not acceptable." Marcus's best man, David Morrison, appeared at his side. David had been Marcus's business partner for 8 years. He ran the European operations of their tech company. He looked like he might be sick. "Marcus, what the hell?" David whispered urgently. "It's handled," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "Just a misunderstanding." But it wasn't handled. Ambassador Harrison had reached the head table. Behind him came Rebecca's mother, Catherine Harrison. Behind her came security. the kind of security that protected diplomatic families. Rebecca Elizabeth, her father said, using her full name like he had when she was 12 and had broken her arm falling from a tree. Come with me. Now. Rebecca looked at Marcus, her husband of 30 minutes, the man who had promised to love and cherish her, the man who had just humiliated her in front of everyone who mattered in their lives. I'm not imagining this, she said quietly, more to herself than to anyone else. He hit me, at our wedding, in front of everyone. The validation whisper every abuse survivor needs to hear. The truth that cuts through the gaslighting and minimizing. The acknowledgement that what happened really happened. Marcus stepped toward her. Becca, you're making this bigger than it needs to be. Stay away from her, Ambassador Harrison said. His voice held the weight of the United States government. Right now. Rebecca placed one hand on her belly. The baby kicked, as if sensing the tension. She had imagined this moment so differently. Dancing with her new husband, cutting the cake, throwing the bouquet, starting their life together. Instead, she was standing in her wedding dress, her cheeks still stinging, wondering how she had gotten here. The phone call, she said, looking directly at Marcus. Who was it? Marcus's jaw tightened. Drop it, Rebecca. No, she said. The word felt foreign in her mouth. She never said no to Marcus. She had learned not to. Tell me who called you during our first dance. The ballroom stayed silent. 200 people waiting for an answer. Marcus looked at his watch, a Rolex Rebecca had given him for his birthday. We'll discuss this later, privately. Us. We'll discuss it now, Ambassador Harrison said. Publicly. Rebecca felt something shift inside her chest. A door opening that she hadn't known was closed. Her father was treating this seriously, not brushing it off, not asking her to keep the peace. For the first time in her relationship with Marcus, someone was taking her side. The baby kicked again. Rebecca wondered what kind of world she was bringing her daughter into. What kind of father Marcus would be. What kind of husband he already was. I need to sit down, she said. Jen immediately guided her to a chair. Not the throne-like chair at the head table. A simple chair away from the crowd. Away from Marcus. Away from the shattered crystal and the shocked whispers. Rebecca sat carefully, her wedding dress pooling around her. The same dress she had tried on 6 months ago, when everything seemed perfect. When Marcus had surprised her with the proposal in Tuscany. When she thought she knew who she was marrying. She touched her cheek again. Still tender. Still real. The orchestra began playing again. Quietly. Background music for a crisis that no one knew how to handle. Marcus straightened his tie. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced to the ballroom, my wife is experiencing some pregnancy hormones. We appreciate your understanding. Rebecca's head snapped up. Pregnancy hormones. As if growing a human being made her incapable of recognizing when she had been struck. As if her legitimate concern about mysterious phone calls was just emotional instability. That's enough, Ambassador Harrison said. His voice carried to every corner of the ballroom. The reception is over. Thank you all for coming. Security began moving through the crowd, politely but firmly encouraging guests toward the exits. The wedding that had taken a year to plan was ending after 30 minutes of marriage. Rebecca sat in her chair, watching her fairy tale crumble. The prince was supposed to rescue her, not be the dragon she needed rescuing from. Jen knelt beside her chair. What do you need, Becca? I need to understand what just happened, Rebecca said, but deep down she already knew. This wasn't the first time Marcus had grabbed her wrist. It wasn't the first time he had dismissed her concerns. It wasn't the first time he had made her feel like she was crazy for noticing things that were really happening. It was just the first time it had happened in front of 200 witnesses. And now she had to decide what to do about it. The bridal suite felt like a sanctuary compared to the chaos of the ballroom below. Rebecca sat on the edge of the king-size bed, still in her wedding dress, methodically removing her jewelry. Each piece made a small sound as it hit the mahogany nightstand. Clink, clink, clink. Her diamond earrings, her grandmother's pearl bracelet, the tennis bracelet that covered the bruises on her wrist. Jen sat beside her, not speaking. Sometimes the best friendship was just presence, being there when the world fell apart. I keep thinking about the engagement party, Rebecca said quietly. Her voice sounded strange in the large room. Remember when Marcus grabbed my wrist? You said something then. Jen nodded. I asked if you were okay. You said you were fine. I lied. Rebecca unclasped her necklace. Another clink. I've been lying for months. The admission hung in the air like incense, heavy and difficult to breathe. What else has he done? Jen asked carefully. Rebecca touched her cheek, still tender from the slap. Little things, or they seemed little at the time. He threw his phone when I questioned the wedding budget, slammed doors when I wanted to discuss our prenup, called me paranoid when I asked about late nights at work. She stood up and walked to the window. The hotel overlooked Lake Geneva. Switzerland had seemed like the perfect location for their wedding, neutral territory between Marcus's American business interests and her father's diplomatic posting. Now it felt like a mistake, like everything else about this marriage. The phone call started 3 weeks ago, Rebecca continued. Always the same number. Marcus would step away to answer. When I asked about them, he said it was business. But business calls don't make you smile like that. Jen joined her at the window. What kind of smile? The kind he used to give me, Rebecca said, before I got pregnant, before I became inconvenient. A knock on the door interrupted them. Ambassador Harrison entered with Rebecca's mother, Catherine. Her parents looked like they had aged 10 years in the past hour. How are you feeling, sweetheart? Catherine asked. Rebecca almost said she was fine. The automatic response, the peaceful answer. Instead, she told the truth. I'm humiliated, I'm scared, and I'm angry that it took getting hit in public for me to admit Marcus has been treating me badly for months. Her parents exchanged a look, the kind of look that meant they had been talking, planning, using their diplomatic training to navigate a crisis. We need to discuss your options, Ambassador Harrison said. He sat in the armchair across from her. His formal posture meant serious conversation. But first, I need to know everything, every incident, every red flag. Rebecca looked at her mother. Catherine had been a diplomat too, before she became an ambassador's wife. She understood power dynamics. She also understood when women were being manipulated. Start with the first time you felt afraid of him, Catherine said gently. Rebecca closed her eyes. The memory came immediately. 2 months after we got engaged, we were at his company's Christmas party. I was talking to David Morrison's wife about pregnancy. Marcus came over and put his hand on my back. It looked affectionate to everyone else, but he was pressing his thumb into my spine, hard enough to hurt. She opened her eyes. Her parents were listening without judgment, without minimizing, without suggesting she was overreacting. When we got home, he said I had embarrassed him, that talking about pregnancy at a work function was inappropriate. He said if I couldn't behave properly at important events, maybe I shouldn't attend them. Isolation, Catherine said quietly. Classic pattern. Rebecca felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Swiss air conditioning. You know about this stuff? I've been briefed on domestic violence indicators, Catherine said. It's part of diplomatic training. We see it in families posted overseas. The stress, the power imbalances, the lack of familiar support systems. But Marcus isn't some stressed diplomat, Rebecca protested. He's successful, rich, charming. Abusers often are, Ambassador Harrison said. His voice was steady. Professional, especially the ones who target women with resources and connections. Rebecca sank back onto the bed. The wedding dress spread around her like a white sea. I thought I was being too sensitive. Marcus said I was hormonal because of the pregnancy, that I was reading too much into normal relationship friction. Gaslighting, Jen said, making you question your own perceptions. The prenup, Rebecca said suddenly. He insisted on a prenup that gives me almost nothing if we divorce within the first 2 years. He said it was standard, that it protected both of us. Ambassador Harrison's expression darkened. Do you have a copy? In my apartment in Geneva, but Marcus has the original. He said he'd give me a copy after the honeymoon. Another red flag, another control mechanism, another way to keep her trapped and uncertain. Rebecca, her father said carefully, I need to tell you something about Marcus's business dealings. She looked up. What do you mean? The FBI has been investigating his company for potential financial fraud, international contracts that don't match reported revenues, payments to shell companies in tax havens. The room seemed to tilt. What? I've known for 3 weeks, since the bachelor party in Monaco. David Morrison mentioned some concerns to one of our security attachés. We did some checking. Rebecca felt sick. You knew and you didn't tell me? I was trying to gather more information before the wedding. I didn't want to ruin your day based on suspicions. Well, Rebecca said bitterly, my day got ruined anyway. Catherine sat beside her on the bed. The investigation is why we think Marcus was so eager to marry you. Your diplomatic status provides certain protections. Access to embassy events, international legitimacy for his business. So he married me for my passport, Rebecca said. The words tasted like ashes. Among other things, Ambassador Harrison said, but that's not your fault. That's his choice, his crime. Rebecca stood up abruptly. She needed to move, to pace, to do something with the energy building inside her chest. The phone calls during the reception, she said. I need to know who was calling. Jen picked up Rebecca's clutch purse from the nightstand. Your phone might have the number if he answered while you were together. Rebecca scrolled through her recent calls. Nothing unusual, but then she checked her blocked numbers list, a function she rarely used. 15 blocked calls from the same number, all from today, all during the wedding preparations and ceremony. He blocked someone from calling me, she said. On my wedding day. Her father stood up. Give me that number. Dad, what are you doing? I'm going to find out who was trying to reach you while Marcus was hitting you at your wedding reception. Ambassador Harrison left the room with Rebecca's phone. The door closed with a soft click. Rebecca looked at herself in the mirror across the room. Still in her wedding dress. Still technically a bride. Still married to a man who had just revealed himself to be someone completely different from who she thought she was marrying. I was so stupid, she said to her reflection. No, Jen said firmly. You were trusting. You were hopeful. You were building a life with someone you loved. That's not stupid. But the signs were all there. The signs were hidden by someone who's very good at hiding them, Catherine said. This isn't your fault, Rebecca. Rebecca touched her cheek again. The sting had faded, but the memory remained. So what happens now? Before anyone could answer, Ambassador Harrison returned. His face was grim. The block number belongs to Marcus's ex-girlfriend, he said. Linda Patterson. She lives in London. She's been trying to call you for 3 weeks. 3 weeks, Rebecca repeated, since the phone calls to Marcus started. Sorry, Curry. I'm going to call her, Ambassador Harrison said, with your permission. Rebecca nodded. She needed to know. Whatever Linda Patterson had to say, it couldn't be worse than what she had already discovered about her new husband. But she was wrong. It could be much worse. Linda Patterson's voice came through the hotel phone speaker with a British accent and barely controlled anger. Is this Rebecca, Marcus's wife? Yes, Rebecca said. She was sitting at the desk in the bridal suite, still in her wedding dress. Her parents and Jen gathered around the phone like it might explode. Thank God. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Marcus blocked my number from your phone, didn't he? Rebecca felt her stomach drop. How did you know that? Because he did the same thing to his previous girlfriend, and the one before that. Linda's voice cracked slightly. Rebecca, you need to get away from him. Now. The room fell silent except for the sound of Rebecca's heart beating in her ears. What do you mean? Rebecca asked, though part of her already knew. Marcus and I dated for 2 years. He told me he loved me, that we'd get married after he established his business in Europe. Then I found out he was engaged to you while we were still together. Rebecca closed her eyes. The pieces were falling into place like dominoes. When did you break up? We didn't. Not officially. He just stopped returning my calls after your engagement announcement appeared in the Washington Post. That was 3 months ago. 3 months ago. Rebecca had been planning her wedding, choosing flowers, tasting cakes, believing she was marrying a man who loved only her. But that's not the worst part, Linda continued. Rebecca, has he ever hit you? The question hung in the air like smoke. Rebecca touched her cheek reflexively. Tonight, she whispered, at our wedding reception. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I tried to warn you. I sent letters to your apartment in Geneva. I tried calling. I even contacted the American embassy, but they said they couldn't interfere in personal matters. Ambassador Harrison's face was stone. What did he do to you? It started small, like it always does. He'd grab my wrist when he was frustrated, twist my arm when I asked questions about his business trips. Then it escalated. Rebecca felt bile rise in her throat. How much? The last time I saw him was 6 weeks ago. He came to London supposedly for business. We had dinner. I confronted him about you, about the engagement. Linda's voice broke. He pushed me down a flight of stairs, told me if I ever contacted you, he'd destroy my career, my life. The room spun around Rebecca. 6 weeks ago, she had been addressing wedding invitations. Marcus had been in London that weekend. He told her it was for a technology conference. Are you injured? Catherine asked gently. I broke my wrist. 3 ribs. But I was lucky. The woman before me wasn't so lucky. There was someone before you? Jen asked. Sarah Mitchell. She dated Marcus right after university. She lives in Boston now. Linda paused. He put her in the hospital. Twice. Rebecca stood up abruptly. The wedding dress felt like it was suffocating her. I need to get out of this dress. Rebecca, there's more, Linda said urgently. The financial fraud investigation? I gave them information, bank records, emails. Marcus has been using his relationships to legitimize fake business deals for years. What kind of relationships? Ambassador Harrison asked. Women with connections, with family money, with access to influential people. Rebecca, he didn't marry you for love. He married you because your father is an ambassador. The words hit Rebecca like physical blows. Every romantic gesture, every sweet word, every promise about their future. All of it calculated, all of it fake. I'm going to be sick, she said. Jen helped her to the bathroom. Rebecca barely made it to the toilet before her stomach emptied itself. The stress, the revelation, the complete destruction of everything she thought she knew about her life. When she emerged, her parents were deep in conversation with Linda. How many others were there? Catherine was asking. At least 4 that I know of. Marcus has a type, successful women with powerful families. He targets them specifically. Rebecca slumped into the chair. So I'm just another Mark. You're the biggest one, Linda said honestly. Ambassador's daughter, diplomatic immunity, international connections. You were his jackpot. Ambassador Harrison stood up. He began pacing the room like he did when he was strategizing diplomatic solutions. Linda, are you willing to testify? He asked. About what? Everything. The violence, the pattern of behavior, the financial fraud. Will it keep him away from Rebecca? It might do more than that, Ambassador Harrison said grimly. Rebecca looked at her father. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that Marcus made a very serious mistake when he hit an ambassador's daughter at a diplomatic event in front of international witnesses. Dad, what does that mean? Ambassador Harrison stopped pacing. It means this isn't just domestic violence anymore. It's an international incident. Rebecca felt something shift inside her chest. Not fear this time. Something else. Something that felt like power. Explain, she said. You're a dependent of a U.S. diplomatic mission. You were assaulted by an American citizen on foreign soil at an event attended by foreign officials. The Swiss authorities have jurisdiction, but so do we. Catherine nodded slowly. And if Marcus is under FBI investigation, then his passport becomes a matter of national security, Ambassador Harrison finished. Rebecca stared at her parents. You can take away his passport? The State Department can, especially if he's considered a flight risk during an active investigation. But he needs his passport for business, Jen said. His company has contracts all over Europe and Asia. Exactly, Ambassador Harrison said. No passport means no international travel. No international travel means his business collapses. For the first time since the slap, Rebecca smiled. Not a happy smile, a fierce one. How long would it take, she asked. If we file the paperwork tonight, by Monday morning Marcus Wellington will be grounded. Linda's voice came through the speaker again. Rebecca, are you going to do it? Rebecca looked around the room, at her parents who were finally taking this seriously, at her best friend who had suspected something was wrong for months, at the evidence of Marcus's pattern of abuse and manipulation. She thought about the mysterious phone calls, the twisted prenup, the way he had isolated her from friends, the way he had made her question her own perceptions. She thought about the baby in her belly, The daughter who would grow up watching how her mother handled being hurt by someone who claimed to love her. Yes, Rebecca said, I'm going to do it. Good, Linda said fiercely, because women like us, we don't have to stay victims. We have resources, we have power, and we have each other. Rebecca stood up. The wedding dress rustled around her like armor. I need to change clothes, she said, and then I need to learn how to destroy someone who tried to destroy me. Her father smiled, the kind of smile that had negotiated peace treaties and dismantled corrupt governments. Now you're thinking like a diplomat, he said. Outside the window, Lake Geneva glittered in the afternoon sun, beautiful and peaceful and completely unaware that someone's life was about to change forever. Rebecca looked at her reflection in the window, still in her wedding dress, still technically a bride, but no longer a victim. She was about to become something much more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Monday morning arrived with rain against the windows of the U.S. consulate in Geneva. Rebecca sat in the legal attaché's office, wearing a navy blue dress instead of wedding white. Her parents flanked her like bodyguards. Attorney Sarah Coleman had flown in from Washington overnight. She specialized in high-profile domestic violence cases and diplomatic law. Her reputation preceded her like thunder before lightning. The evidence is overwhelming, Sarah said, spreading documents across the conference table. Photographic evidence of the assault, witness statements from 200 guests, prior complaints from previous victims, FBI investigation files. Rebecca stared at the photos from her wedding reception. Someone had captured the exact moment of impact. Marcus's hand connecting with her face, her expression of shock and pain, the protective gesture of her hand flying to her cheek. I look so surprised, she said quietly. You were, Sarah replied. Most domestic violence escalates gradually. Public assault is usually a desperation move. Desperation? Marcus knew you were getting suspicious. The blocked phone calls, your questions about his business trips. He was running out of time to lock you into the marriage. Ambassador Harrison leaned forward. Where do we stand with the State Department? Emergency protective order filed this morning. Passport flagging request submitted 1 hour ago. The Swiss authorities are cooperating fully. Rebecca felt a strange calm settling over her, like the eye of a hurricane. What happens when Marcus finds out? He'll panic, Sarah said matter-of-factly. Men like Marcus rely on mobility, on being able to run when their schemes collapse. Taking away his passport is like caging a wild animal. Through the conference room windows, Rebecca could see the flags of 12 nations flying in the courtyard, each one representing power, authority, the weight of international law. His business partner called me yesterday, Rebecca said. David Morrison. He's worried about their company. He should be, Ambassador Harrison said. Without Marcus's ability to travel, their international contracts become worthless. Sarah opened another file. We've been in contact with David Morrison's attorney. He's prepared to testify about Marcus's fraudulent practices if it means protecting his own legal exposure. So David's abandoning him? David's protecting himself, as he should. Rebecca understood. In the 24 hours since her wedding reception, everyone was choosing sides. The abuse that had been private was now public. The manipulation that had been subtle was now obvious. People who had made excuses for Marcus were suddenly remembering red flags they had ignored. Linda Patterson is flying in this afternoon, Sarah continued. She's prepared to give a full deposition about her relationship with Marcus. And the other victims? 2 are willing to testify. 1 is still too afraid, but we have medical records. Police reports that were filed but not pursued. A pattern spanning 5 years. Rebecca touched her cheek. The bruise had faded, but the memory remained. How many women did he hurt while I was planning our wedding? That's not your fault, Sarah said firmly. You couldn't have known. But I could have left earlier, when he first grabbed my wrist, when he first made me feel crazy for asking questions. Rebecca, her mother said gently, you stayed because you loved him, because you believed his promises, because you wanted to believe people could change. That's not weakness, Sarah added. That's hope. And hope isn't a character flaw. A knock on the door interrupted them. The legal attaché entered with an urgent expression. The Swiss Federal Police want to speak with you, he said to Rebecca. Marcus filed a counter-complaint this morning. Rebecca's blood chilled. What kind of complaint? He's claiming you assaulted him, that the slap was self-defense. The room fell silent. Rebecca felt that familiar sensation of reality tilting sideways, the same feeling she'd had throughout her relationship with Marcus, when he made her question what she had seen with her own eyes. But there are 200 witnesses, Jen said. She had been sitting quietly in the corner, taking notes. Witnesses who saw Rebecca fall backward after being struck, Sarah said. Witnesses who saw her protective gesture. Witnesses who heard Marcus dismiss her concerns as pregnancy hormones. Ambassador Harrison's jaw tightened. This is classic Darvo. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. He's trying to make me look crazy again, Rebecca said. The old fear crept into her voice, the doubt that Marcus had cultivated so carefully. Rebecca, Sarah said firmly, look at me. Rebecca met her eyes. You are not crazy. You did not assault anyone. You were the victim of domestic violence in front of international witnesses. Marcus is desperate, and he's making mistakes. But what if the Swiss police believe him? They won't, Ambassador Harrison said, because we have something Marcus doesn't have. What? The truth, and institutional power to protect it. The legal attaché cleared his throat. There's something else. Marcus's passport has been officially flagged as of 1 hour ago. He can't leave Switzerland without State Department approval. Rebecca felt that shift in her chest again. Not fear this time. Something fiercer. Does he know yet? He found out when he tried to check in for a flight to London this morning. Rebecca could imagine the scene. Marcus at the airport, confident and charming, expecting to resume his normal life. Then the customs official telling him his passport was flagged, his face when he realized his mobility was gone. What did he do? According to airport security, he demanded to speak to someone in charge. When they explained the situation, he became verbally abusive. They had to escort him from the terminal. Sarah smiled grimly. And there's our escalation pattern. When Marcus doesn't get his way, he becomes aggressive. More evidence for our case, Ambassador Harrison added. Rebecca stood up and walked to the window. The rain had stopped. Swiss flags hung limp in the still air. She thought about Marcus, somewhere in Geneva, realizing that his carefully constructed life was collapsing. She should feel sorry for him. 6 months ago, she would have. 6 months ago, she would have made excuses, found ways to help him, blamed herself for his problems. But that was before she understood who he really was. I want to see him, she said suddenly. The room fell silent. Rebecca, that's not advisable, Sarah said carefully. I don't want to talk to him. I just want to see him. When he realizes he can't control this situation. That could be dangerous, her mother said. Not if it's in a controlled environment, with witnesses, with security. Ambassador Harrison understood. You want to see him powerless. I want to see him the way he made me feel. Trapped, unable to leave, dependent on other people's decisions. Sarah considered this. We could arrange a supervised meeting at the consulate. Full security, limited time. Do it, Rebecca said. Her phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Becca, we need to talk. This has gone too far. I can explain everything. M. Rebecca showed the message to Sarah. He's trying to regain control, Sarah said, making you think this is something that can be explained away. Should I respond? Yes, tell him you'll meet him here, tomorrow at 10 a.m., with attorneys present. Rebecca typed the response. Her hands were steady. Her thoughts were clear. For the first time since her wedding reception, she felt like she was the one making decisions. Marcus could explain all he wanted. She was done listening to his lies. Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. sharp. Rebecca sat in the same conference room where she had filed her complaint 2 days earlier. This time she faced the door like she was preparing for battle. Sarah Coleman sat to her right, Ambassador Harrison to her left. Swiss federal police officer Mueller occupied the corner, taking notes. The American flag behind Rebecca's chair felt like armor. Remember, Sarah said quietly, you don't have to prove anything to him. You don't have to justify your actions. You're here to gather information. Rebecca nodded. Her navy dress felt more powerful than any wedding gown. I'm ready. The door opened. Marcus Wellington entered with his attorney, a Swiss lawyer named Klaus Weber. Marcus looked like he hadn't slept. His usually perfect hair was disheveled. His expensive suit was wrinkled. He had always been so careful about his appearance. Image was everything to Marcus. Seeing him look less than perfect felt like a small victory. "Rebecca," Marcus said, his voice gentle and pleading, "thank God you're okay. I've been so worried." She stared at him across the conference table. 48 hours ago, this man had hit her at their wedding reception. Now he was acting like a concerned husband. "Worried about what?" she asked. "About you, about the baby, about this misunderstanding that's gotten completely out of hand." Misunderstanding. Rebecca felt that familiar sensation of reality shifting. Marcus's superpower was making her question what she knew to be true. "Is that what you call it?" she asked. "A misunderstanding. Becca, you know I would never intentionally hurt you. What happened at the reception? I was stressed about work, about the FBI investigation. I wasn't thinking clearly." There it was, the excuse, the minimizing, the suggestion that external circumstances had made him do something he wouldn't normally do. "Tell me about Linda Patterson," Rebecca said. Marcus's face went pale. "Who?" "Linda Patterson, your girlfriend in London, the one who's been trying to call me for 3 weeks." Klaus Weber whispered something in German to Marcus. Marcus shook his head. "Linda was a friend, a business contact, nothing more." "A business contact who you pushed down a flight of stairs 6 weeks ago?" Marcus's jaw tightened. The mask was slipping. "I don't know what she told you, but Linda has problems, mental health issues. She's been stalking me since our business relationship ended." Sarah leaned forward. "Mr. Wellington, we have medical records from Linda's hospital visit, photos of her injuries, security camera footage from the restaurant where you had dinner." "That proves nothing," Klaus Weber interjected. "It proves a pattern," Sarah replied, "which is why your client's passport has been revoked, pending a full investigation." Marcus slammed his hand on the table. "This is insane. You can't ground me because of some crazy ex-girlfriend's lies." The outburst filled the room like thunder. Officer Mueller looked up from his notes. Ambassador Harrison didn't move a muscle. Rebecca felt something click into place. This was who Marcus really was when he couldn't control the situation. Angry, volatile, dangerous. "Mr. Wellington," Officer Mueller said in accented English, "please control yourself." Marcus took a deep breath. When he looked at Rebecca again, his expression had shifted to wounded innocence. "Becca, please. Think about our baby, our life together. Don't let other people destroy what we've built." "What we built?" Rebecca asked. "You mean the marriage you entered into while you were still dating someone else? The prenup designed to leave me with nothing? The business deals you made using my father's diplomatic connections without telling me?" Each question hit him like a physical blow. Marcus looked at his attorney desperately. "My client doesn't have to answer these accusations," Klaus Weber said. "He doesn't," Sarah agreed, "but the FBI investigators might have different expectations." "What FBI investigators?" Marcus demanded. "The ones who want to discuss your shell companies in the Cayman Islands, your fake invoices to European clients, your use of diplomatic events to legitimize fraudulent business deals." Marcus's face went from pale to gray. "You can't prove any of that." "David Morrison thinks otherwise," Ambassador Harrison said quietly. "David?" Marcus's voice cracked. "What did David tell you?" "Everything," Rebecca said. "About the fake contracts, the money laundering, the way you've been using my family's diplomatic status to avoid scrutiny." Marcus stood up abruptly. "David doesn't know anything. He's just trying to save his own skin." "Sit down," Officer Mueller said firmly. Marcus remained standing. "This is a setup, all of it. Rebecca, they're using you to get to me." Rebecca laughed, actually laughed. "Marcus, you used me to get to them. For 2 years. Our entire relationship was about what my family could do for your business." "That's not true." "Then explain why you proposed right after my father was appointed to Switzerland. Explain why our honeymoon was planned around your business meetings in Monaco. Explain why you insisted on a Swiss wedding where your potential investors could meet my diplomatic family." Each word hit its target. Marcus's carefully constructed facade was crumbling in real time. "You loved me," he said desperately. I know you loved me. I loved who I thought you were, Rebecca replied. But that person never existed. Marcus turned to his attorney. They whispered urgently in German. Rebecca caught fragments. Passport, appeal, emergency travel. My client needs to return to the United States for medical treatment, Klaus Weber announced. What medical treatment? Sarah asked. Stress-related cardiac symptoms brought on by this persecution. Rebecca almost laughed again. Marcus was trying to manipulate his way out of Switzerland by claiming health problems. Mr. Wellington can receive excellent cardiac care in Geneva, Officer Mueller said dryly. But his doctors are in Boston, Klaus Weber insisted. Then his doctors can consult remotely, Ambassador Harrison said. The Swiss medical system is quite advanced. Marcus realized his escape route was blocked. His face flushed red with anger. This is about money, isn't it? He said to Rebecca. You want to take everything in the divorce. I want you to stay away from me, Rebecca said simply. Forever. And in the baby? You're going to raise my daughter alone? I'm going to raise my daughter safely. The distinction was clear. My daughter, not our daughter. Marcus was no longer part of that equation. You can't keep me from my child, Marcus said. I can keep a violent felon from my child, Rebecca replied, which is what you're going to be after the FBI finishes their investigation. Marcus looked around the room wildly, at his attorney who was checking his watch, at the Swiss police officer who was documenting everything, at the American officials who held his future in their hands. How long? He asked quietly. How long what? Sarah asked. How long until I can get my passport back? That depends on how cooperative you are with the ongoing investigations. And if I'm not cooperative? Then you might be a permanent resident of Switzerland, Ambassador Harrison said, whether you like it or not. Rebecca watched Marcus process this information. His business empire required international travel. His wealth was tied to global contracts. His identity was built on mobility and freedom. All of it was gone, just like her trust had been gone after his first lie, just like her safety had been gone after his first violent act. The baby, Marcus said again, reaching for the only leverage he thought he had left, will be raised by someone who understands that love doesn't come with bruises, Rebecca said. She stood up. The meeting was over. She had seen what she came to see. Marcus Wellington, powerful CEO, was now just another man whose choices had consequences he couldn't escape. I'll see you in court, she said. Rebecca, please. She didn't look back. Wednesday afternoon brought unexpected visitors to Rebecca's parents' residence. The diplomatic compound sat high above Lake Geneva, surrounded by security and serenity. Rebecca was in the garden reading pregnancy books and trying to imagine a future that didn't include Marcus. Ma'am, the security officer approached carefully. There's a woman here to see you, says her name is Margaret Wellington. Rebecca's blood chilled. Margaret Wellington, Marcus's mother. Does she seem hostile? Rebecca asked. No, ma'am. She seems upset, and she's alone. Rebecca considered this. She had met Margaret exactly 3 times during her engagement. Marcus had always made excuses about why his family couldn't visit more often. Now she wondered what the real reason had been. Send her to the terrace, Rebecca said, but stay close. Margaret Wellington was nothing like her son. Where Marcus was tall and commanding, she was small and nervous. Where he was polished and confident, she seemed fragile and uncertain. Rebecca, Margaret said, her voice shaking, I'm so sorry to bother you. I know this is complicated. Please sit, Rebecca said, gesturing to a wrought iron chair. Would you like some tea? That's very kind. They sat in silence while the housekeeper brought a tea service. Margaret's hands trembled as she lifted her cup. I came to apologize, Margaret said finally. For what? For my son. For what he did to you. For what he's done to other women. Rebecca felt something shift in her chest. Other women? Margaret nodded, tears forming in her eyes. Marcus's father was similar. I thought maybe it was just the stress of business, the pressure of success. I made excuses for years. What kind of excuses? When Marcus was arrested for assault in college, I blamed the other girl, said she was lying for attention. When his first serious girlfriend showed up at our house with a black eye, I told her she must have provoked him. Rebecca set down her teacup carefully. How many were there? That I know of, 5, including you. But I suspect there were others I never met. Walker. The garden felt very quiet. Only the sound of wind through the trees and water lapping against the lake shore below. Why are you telling me this? Rebecca asked. Because I spent 30 years married to a man who hurt me. I told myself it was love, that I could change him, that if I just tried harder, he'd become the man I fell in love with. Margaret wiped her eyes with a tissue from her purse. But that man never existed, just like the man you fell in love with never existed. They're actors, Rebecca. They study us and become whoever they think we want them to be. Rebecca felt a recognition so deep it was almost physical. Marcus used to say he loved that I was strong and independent. But then he slowly made me feel weak and dependent. Exactly. They tear down the very qualities they claim to love. How did you finally leave? Margaret looked surprised. I didn't. Marcus's father died of a heart attack when Marcus was 25. I was never brave enough to leave. But you could have been happy. Maybe, but I was too afraid to find out. They sat in comfortable silence, watching boats move across the lake. Two women who had loved the same type of man and paid the same price. Marcus called me yesterday, Margaret said. He wanted me to convince you to drop the charges, to tell you that family is important, that marriage requires forgiveness. What did you tell him? I told him that some things can't be forgiven and some people can't be changed. Rebecca felt tears in her own eyes. Thank you. For what? For being the mother I needed to hear from, for telling me the truth instead of protecting him. Margaret reached across the table and took Rebecca's hand. You're going to be a wonderful mother because you already know the most important lesson. What's that? That protecting your child is more important than protecting a man's reputation. Before Rebecca could respond, the security officer approached again. Ma'am, there's a gentleman here. Says he's David Morrison. Rebecca looked at Margaret. Marcus's business partner. I should go, Margaret said, standing up. Actually, Rebecca said, would you mind staying? I think David might need to hear what you just told me. David Morrison looked like he had aged 5 years in 3 days. His usually confident demeanor was replaced by nervous energy and dark circles under his eyes. Rebecca, he said, approaching the terrace cautiously. Thank you for seeing me. David, this is Margaret Wellington, Marcus's mother. David's face went pale. Mrs. Wellington, I'm sorry about everything. Don't apologize to me, Margaret said firmly. Apologize to the women my son hurt. David sat down heavily in an empty chair. That's actually why I'm here. Go on, Rebecca said. I've been thinking about the past 8 years, working with Marcus, building the company together, and I realized I've been making excuses for behavior I knew was wrong. What kind of behavior? The way he talked about his girlfriends, always finding something wrong with them, always making them sound crazy or demanding when they broke up. Rebecca felt that familiar chill. He told you they were crazy? All of them. He said Linda was unstable, that Sarah before her was bipolar, that Maria before Sarah was a gold digger who made false accusations when he wouldn't marry her. Margaret leaned forward. Were any of them actually diagnosed with mental illness? I don't think so, David said slowly. I think Marcus just labels women who stand up to him. Rebecca understood. It was a pattern, a way of discrediting victims before they could tell their stories. David, she said carefully, what exactly do you know about Marcus's business practices? David looked around nervously. Are we being recorded? No, Rebecca said, but you should assume that anything you tell me might be shared with investigators. David nodded. The FBI came to my office yesterday. They want to know about our international contracts, about payments to companies I've never heard of, about meetings Marcus had without me. What did you tell them? The truth, that Marcus handled all the overseas relationships, that he insisted on managing certain client accounts personally, that I signed documents without always understanding what they were for. That was dangerous, Margaret said. I know that now, but Marcus was persuasive. He made me feel like questioning him meant I didn't trust him. Rebecca recognized the dynamic, the same manipulation that had made her question her own perceptions. What happens to your company now? She asked. It's finished, David said bluntly. Without Marcus's ability to travel, We can't service our international contracts. 3 major clients have already canceled. The bank froze our accounts pending the FBI investigation. I'm sorry, Rebecca said, and meant it. I'm not, David replied. I should have asked harder questions years ago. I should have listened when women tried to tell me who Marcus really was. He looked directly at Rebecca. I'm going to testify against Marcus about everything I know. That's going to destroy any remaining business relationship you have, Margaret pointed out. Good, David said. Some relationships deserve to be destroyed. Rebecca felt something she hadn't expected. Hope, not just for her own case, but for the system working the way it was supposed to. David, she said, when you testify, will you include the business practices, the financial fraud? All of it, he confirmed. Marcus used your family's diplomatic connections to legitimize fake deals. He bragged about it, said your father's reputation made clients trust him automatically. The violation felt fresh and sharp. He used my family. He used everyone, Margaret said quietly. That's what men like Marcus do. They take everything good about the people who love them and twist it into a weapon. Rebecca touched her belly. The baby kicked, as if sensing the conversation. Not this time, she said. This time, the people he used are fighting back. David nodded. I've contacted the other business partners who were defrauded. They're all willing to cooperate with prosecutors. And I've contacted the other mothers, Margaret added. The mothers of the women Marcus hurt. We're going to write letters to the judge. Character witnesses, but not for Marcus. Rebecca looked around the terrace, at Marcus's mother, choosing her daughter-in-law over her son, at his business partner, choosing honesty over loyalty, at the evidence that sometimes people do the right thing even when it's difficult. He's going to be very angry, she said. Let him be angry, Margaret replied. Angry men in prison cells can't hurt anyone. For the first time since her wedding reception, Rebecca laughed. Really laughed. Marcus had spent 2 years building a web of control around her, but that same web was now trapping him instead. The hunter had become the hunted, and everyone who had enabled him was switching sides. Thursday night. Rebecca sat alone in her childhood bedroom at her parents' diplomatic residence. Rain drummed against the windows like fingertips on glass. She had dismissed her parents and Jen hours ago, needing space to think, to process, to feel everything she had been holding back. The pregnancy books lay scattered on her bed. What to expect when you're expecting. The first year, raising strong daughters. Each one a reminder that she was about to become a mother while her own life crumbled around her. She touched her belly. 28 weeks pregnant, the baby would arrive in 3 months. A daughter who would never know her father except as a cautionary tale. I'm sorry, Rebecca whispered to her unborn child. I'm sorry I chose him. I'm sorry I didn't see who he really was. I'm sorry you're going to grow up with only half a family. The baby kicked in response, a small flutter that felt like forgiveness. Rebecca's phone buzzed. Another blocked number. She had been getting calls all day from blocked numbers. Probably Marcus trying different phones to reach her. She had stopped answering after the 5th call, but this time she answered. Hello? Rebecca, this is Sarah Mitchell. Linda Patterson gave me your number. Sarah Mitchell, the name David Morrison had mentioned. The woman who had dated Marcus after university. Sarah, hello. Linda said you might call. I'm in Boston. I saw the news about your wedding, about what happened. I needed to tell you something. Rebecca sat up straighter. What is it? I was pregnant once, with Marcus's baby, 7 years ago. Rebecca's blood went cold. What happened? I miscarried. At 6 months. After Marcus pushed me down our apartment stairs. The room tilted around Rebecca. She gripped the phone with both hands. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I told myself it was an accident, that Marcus didn't mean for me to fall, that he was just upset about work stress. But looking back, I think he knew exactly what he was doing. Rebecca felt bile rise in her throat. Why are you telling me this? Because you're pregnant. Because I don't want what happened to me to happen to you. Because Marcus gets more dangerous when he feels trapped. I'm staying at my parents' compound. There's security. Good. Don't let your guard down, even for a minute. Sarah, did you ever report what happened? I tried, but Marcus was very convincing. Rich, educated, no criminal record. I was just a grieving woman with a dead baby making accusations. No one believed me. Rebecca understood. The same dynamic that had protected Marcus for years. Wealth and charm as armor against consequences. It's different now, as Rebecca said. There are witnesses, other victims, an FBI investigation. I hope so. I really hope so. But Rebecca? Yes? Be prepared for him to escalate. When men like Marcus lose control, they don't just give up. They double down. After Sarah hung up, Rebecca sat in the dark for a long time. Rain continued against the windows. The baby continued kicking. The weight of what she was facing settled around her like fog. She had been thinking about this as a legal problem, a diplomatic incident, a business conspiracy. But it was more than that. It was about a man who had killed his own child to maintain control over a woman. Rebecca walked to the window and looked out at the lake. Security lights illuminated the grounds. Guards patrolled the perimeter. She was as safe as anyone could be. But safety wasn't the same as peace. Her phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed her grandmother's number. Grandma Rose? Rebecca, darling, I'm calling from the hotel in Geneva. I wanted to check on you before I fly home tomorrow. Grandmother Rose, 92 years old, survivor of the Depression, World War II, and 6 decades of marriage to a diplomat. If anyone would understand complicated situations, it would be her. I'm scared, Grandma. Of course you are. Fear is appropriate when dangerous people are angry at you. What if I made the wrong choice? What if I should have tried to work things out with Marcus? Rose was quiet for a moment. Rebecca, let me tell you about your grandfather. Grandpa William? Not William, my first husband. Robert. Rebecca blinked. I didn't know you were married before Grandpa. I was 19. Robert was 25. Handsome, charming, from a good family. Everyone said I was lucky to catch him. What happened? He hit me on our honeymoon, slapped me for talking to another man at a hotel bar. I was mortified. I made excuses. I thought it was my fault. Rebecca felt a chill of recognition. How long did you stay? 2 years. He broke my wrist, 3 ribs. Gave me a concussion that put me in the hospital for a week. Grandma, I had no idea. I never told anyone, not even your mother. But I left him, Rebecca. In 1942, when women didn't leave their husbands, when divorce was scandalous, when I had no money and no job and nowhere to go. How did you survive? I went to work in a factory, making parts for bomber planes. I lived in a boarding house with 3 other women. We all had stories like mine. We all helped each other survive. Rebecca wiped tears from her eyes. What happened to Robert? He drank himself to death during the Korean War. Never remarried, never had children, died alone and angry at 38. Do you ever regret leaving? Never, not once. Because leaving led me to your grandfather, to 45 years of marriage to a man who never raised his hand to me, never made me feel small, never made me question my own mind. But what if I'm making a mistake? What if Marcus can change? Rose's voice was gentle but firm. Darling, men like Marcus don't change. They just get better at hiding who they are, until they can't hide anymore. I keep thinking about the baby, growing up without a father. Better to grow up without a father than with a dangerous one. Trust me on this. After Rose hung up, Rebecca lay back on her bed. 4 generations of women in her family, her grandmother who had survived domestic violence in the 1940s, her mother who had built a diplomatic career, herself fighting a battle that spanned continents and legal systems, and her daughter who would grow up knowing that women in their family didn't accept abuse. The pattern was breaking. Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown Swiss number. I know where you're staying. We need to talk. Tonight. Come alone or I'll make this much worse for everyone. Aum. Her hands shook as she screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Sarah Coleman, then to her father, then to Swiss Federal Police Officer Mueller. Within 10 minutes, additional security had surrounded the compound. Within 20 minutes, the Swiss police were tracing the phone number. Within 30 minutes, Marcus Wellington was in custody for violating his restraining order. Rebecca watched from her bedroom window as police cars surrounded the diplomatic residence. Their lights flashed red and blue against the rain-soaked night. She wasn't a victim hiding in fear. She was a woman with resources, protection, and institutional support. Marcus had made the same mistake as every abuser who thought his victim was powerless. He had forgotten that she came from a family that knew how to fight wars and win them. Friday morning broke clear and cold over Lake Geneva. Rebecca sat in the secure conference room at the U.S. consulate, watching Swiss federal police officers present evidence of Marcus's restraining order violation. The cell phone was purchased yesterday with cash, Officer Mueller explained. Mr. Wellington used a false name, but security cameras at the shop identified him clearly. Sarah Coleman reviewed the documentation with professional satisfaction. Threatening a diplomatic family member while under federal investigation, that's going to add significant time to any potential sentence. Rebecca felt strangely calm. The old fear was gone, replaced by something steadier, more permanent. Where is he now? La Brenaz prison, Officer Mueller replied. Solitary confinement for his own protection. Some of the other inmates recognized him from news coverage. Ambassador Harrison leaned back in his chair. How long can you hold him? The violation of the restraining order carries a maximum sentence of 2 years in Swiss prison. If the American authorities want to extradite him for the federal charges, that's a separate process. We want him extradited, Sarah said immediately. The FBI investigation is ready to proceed to indictment. Rebecca touched her belly. The baby had been active all morning, as if sensing the change in her mother's stress levels. What about his passport? Permanently revoked pending resolution of all criminal charges, Sarah replied. Even if he makes bail, he's not going anywhere. And his business? Completely collapsed. David Morrison filed for bankruptcy protection yesterday. All international contracts are void. The SEC has frozen all company assets. Rebecca nodded. Marcus's entire identity had been built on wealth, power, and mobility. All three were gone. I'd like to make a statement, she said. The room fell quiet. What kind of statement? Sarah asked carefully. Public, about domestic violence, about how diplomatic immunity can protect victims instead of covering up crimes. Ambassador Harrison frowned. Rebecca, that could create security concerns. Once you go public, you become a target for criticism. I'm already a target, Rebecca replied. The difference is now I have a platform to fight back. Sarah nodded slowly. We could arrange a press conference. Control the narrative. Make sure your message reaches the right audiences. What would you say? Her mother asked. Rebecca had been thinking about this since her conversation with Grandmother Rose, about the women who had come before her, about the daughter who would come after. I'd say that silence protects abusers, that shame belongs to the people who hurt others, not the people who get hurt, that having resources means using them to protect people who don't have the same advantages. Officer Mueller looked up from his notes. Ms. Harrison, there is something else you should know. 3 more women have come forward since Mr. Wellington's arrest. Women from his university years who were afraid to speak before. 3 more? All with similar stories, escalating violence, financial manipulation, threats when they tried to leave. Rebecca felt something settle in her chest. Not satisfaction exactly, more like confirmation. Marcus wasn't a man who had made a mistake. He was a predator who had been operating for over a decade. Will they testify? 2 of them, yes. The third is still too frightened. But she's provided written statements and medical records. Sarah made notes on her legal pad. That brings our total to 6 victims willing to testify, plus the financial fraud charges, plus the diplomatic incident, plus the restraining order violation. How long could he get? If convicted on all charges, 20 to 25 years. Rebecca tried to imagine Marcus at 59 years old, getting out of prison with no business, no money, no reputation, having to register as a convicted felon, being forever marked as someone who couldn't be trusted. She should feel sorry for him. She didn't. I want to visit him, she said suddenly. The room fell silent again. Rebecca, that's absolutely not advisable, Sarah said firmly. Why not? Because seeing you might trigger another violent episode. Because anything you say could be misconstrued. Because he might try to manipulate you into feeling sorry for him. I won't be manipulated anymore, Rebecca said. But I need to see him, to understand how I fell in love with someone who never existed. Ambassador Harrison considered this. If we arrange maximum security, glass partition, no physical contact, time limit, Shwana, and full recording of the conversation for legal purposes, Sarah added. Rebecca nodded. I'm not going to reconcile with him. I'm not going to forgive him. I just need to see who he really is when he can't pretend anymore. Her phone buzzed with a message from David Morrison. Rebecca, I wanted you to know I found something in Marcus's office files. Travel records that don't match what he told me. Bank transfers to accounts in Linda Patterson's name. I think he was stalking her systematically. The FBI wants to see everything. I'm sorry I didn't look harder before. Rebecca showed the message to Sarah. More evidence, Sarah said grimly. The pattern is even worse than we thought. Stalking adds another federal charge, Officer Mueller noted. Rebecca stood up and walked to the window. Geneva spread out below her like a map of possibilities. Somewhere in this city, Marcus was sitting in a prison cell, probably still believing he could talk his way out of consequences. But the consequences weren't hers to give or take away anymore. They belonged to the legal system, to the other victims, to the evidence that couldn't be charmed or manipulated or explained away. Schedule the press conference, she said, and schedule the prison visit. I want to do both this week. Are you sure? Her mother asked. Rebecca turned from the window. I've spent 2 years making decisions based on what Marcus wanted, what Marcus needed, what would keep Marcus happy. I'm done with that. What do you want instead? Sarah asked. I want other women to know they don't have to stay. I want them to understand that having power means using it. I want my daughter to grow up in a world where men like Marcus face consequences. She paused, thinking about grandmother Rose leaving her abusive husband in 1942, about the courage that must have taken, about the life that courage had made possible. I want to be the woman my grandmother was, the woman my daughter will need me to be. Ambassador Harrison smiled, the kind of smile that had ended wars and built peace treaties. Now you're thinking like a Harrison, he said. Outside the window, the Swiss flag flew alongside the American flag in the afternoon sun. 2 countries. 2 legal systems, 1 woman who had learned to navigate both. Marcus had wanted to use her family's diplomatic connections for his benefit. Instead, those same connections were going to put him in prison. The irony was almost perfect. 6 weeks later, Rebecca stood at the podium in the United Nations Human Rights Council chamber in Geneva. 7 months pregnant now, she wore a burgundy dress that emphasized her condition rather than hiding it. The baby kicked against her ribs as she looked out at the assembled delegates, journalists, and advocates. My name is Rebecca Harrison, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. 6 weeks ago, I was a victim of domestic violence. Today, I stand before you as something else entirely. The audience was silent. Behind her, the flags of 193 nations created a backdrop of international authority. I stand here as a woman who learned that having privilege means using it, that having resources means sharing them, that having protection means extending it to others who aren't as fortunate. Rebecca's press conference 3 weeks earlier had made international headlines. Ambassador's daughter exposes CEO's abuse network. Diplomatic immunity used to protect victim instead of perpetrator. Swiss-American cooperation leads to major fraud convictions. Marcus's trial had lasted 2 weeks. 6 women testified about his pattern of abuse. David Morrison provided evidence of systematic financial fraud. The FBI presented documentation of money laundering, tax evasion, and interstate stalking. The verdict had been unanimous on all counts. 22 years in federal prison. Today I'm announcing the Harrison Foundation for Diplomatic Family Safety, Rebecca continued, a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting the family members of diplomatic personnel from domestic violence. Ambassador Harrison sat in the front row, his pride evident. Next to him, Margaret Wellington wiped tears from her eyes. Linda Patterson had flown in from London for the announcement. Sarah Mitchell was participating by video link from Boston. Domestic violence doesn't respect borders. It doesn't care about diplomatic status or international law. But international law can care about domestic violence. And that's what we're here to change. Rebecca outlined the Foundation's 3 primary goals. First, education programs for diplomatic families about recognizing and reporting abuse. Second, legal advocacy services for victims navigating multiple legal systems. Third, a confidential support network for family members who felt isolated by their diplomatic status. The man who abused me thought my family's diplomatic connections made me a valuable target, Rebecca said. He was right about my value. He was wrong about who would benefit from it. The audience erupted in applause. Rebecca waited for quiet before continuing. 6 months ago, I thought strength meant staying silent. I thought loyalty meant protecting someone who was hurting me. I thought love meant accepting unacceptable behavior. She touched her belly. The baby had grown quiet, as if listening. Now I know that strength means speaking truth. Loyalty means protecting yourself and others from harm. And love? Real love never comes with bruises. More applause. Rebecca saw familiar faces in the audience. Jen, who had taken leave from her job to help establish the foundation. Catherine Harrison, who would serve as the foundation's first executive director. Even David Morrison, who had donated his remaining personal assets to fund their initial operations. The Harrison Foundation will work with existing organizations to create safe houses specifically for diplomatic family members. We'll train embassy security staff to recognize signs of domestic violence. We'll provide legal assistance to victims who need to navigate multiple jurisdictions. Rebecca paused to take a sip of water. The baby kicked approvingly. Most importantly, we'll make sure that no woman has to choose between her safety and her family's diplomatic career. No one should have to stay quiet about abuse to protect their spouse's security clearance or their parents' posting. The presentation concluded with a video testimonial from Linda Patterson, who had returned to university to study international law. Her goal was to work with the foundation on legal advocacy. Rebecca saved my life, Linda said to the camera, not by rescuing me, but by showing me how to rescue myself. By proving that women with resources have an obligation to help women without them. As the audience filed out, Rebecca remained at the podium. Swiss Federal Police Officer Mueller approached with a small smile. Ms. Harrison, I have news about Mr. Wellington. What kind of news? He's been placed in protective custody at the federal prison in Massachusetts. It seems his reputation preceded him. Rebecca nodded. She felt no satisfaction in Marcus's suffering, only relief that he couldn't hurt anyone else. And the other victims, how are they doing? Linda Patterson is thriving. Sarah Mitchell has started her own support group for women who lost pregnancies due to domestic violence. The 3 university victims are all in therapy and doing well. I'm glad. Miss Harrison, may I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever regret marrying him, even knowing how it ended? Rebecca considered the question. If she hadn't married Marcus, she wouldn't have discovered his criminal network. Linda Patterson might still be isolated and afraid. Sarah Mitchell might never have gotten justice for her lost pregnancy. The other victims might never have found the courage to speak. I regret that it took so long to see who he really was, she said finally. But I don't regret that seeing him clearly led to something meaningful. Her parents approached the podium as the chamber emptied. How do you feel? Her mother asked. Tired, Rebecca said honestly, but good tired, like I've been working towards something important. You have, Ambassador Harrison said. This foundation will help people for decades to come. Rebecca looked around the empty chamber. 6 months ago, she had been a naive woman planning a fairy tale wedding. Now she was the founder of an international nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting vulnerable people. The transformation wasn't complete yet. She still had 3 months of pregnancy ahead, still had to navigate single motherhood, still had to build a life that had nothing to do with Marcus Wellington. But for the first time since her wedding day, she was excited about that life instead of afraid of it. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Rebecca's heart skipped, remembering Marcus's threatening messages. But this message was different. Ms. Harrison, my name is Elena Vasquez. I'm the wife of a Mexican diplomat posted to Belgium. I saw your speech today. I need help. Can we talk? Rebecca smiled and typed back immediately. Yes, we can definitely talk. You're not alone anymore. The Harrison Foundation was already serving its first client. Rebecca gathered her notes and headed for the exit. Outside, Lake Geneva sparkled in the afternoon sun. Somewhere in the city, Marcus was probably watching news coverage of her speech from his prison cell. Let him watch. Let him see what real power looked like when it was used for protection instead of control. Let him understand that the woman he had tried to destroy had become stronger than he had ever been. The elevator doors closed, carrying Rebecca toward her new life, toward her daughter's future, toward a world where women like Elena Vasquez didn't have to suffer in silence. Marcus had wanted to use her family's diplomatic connections. Mission accomplished, just not the way he had planned. 3 months later, Rebecca Eleanor Harrison entered the world at exactly 8 pounds, 6 ounces. She arrived 2 weeks early, as if eager to meet the family that had been preparing for her arrival. Rebecca held her daughter for the first time in the pristine delivery room at Geneva University Hospital. The baby had dark hair like her mother and serious gray eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. "She's perfect," Jen whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She's a Harrison," Ambassador Harrison said with obvious pride. "Look at that determined expression." "I mean," Catherine leaned over to examine her granddaughter's tiny features. "She's going to be formidable." Rebecca traced her finger along the baby's cheek. Such soft skin, such small hands, such enormous potential. "Eleanor Rose Harrison," Rebecca said softly, "named for her great-grandmother, who taught me that leaving takes more courage than staying." The room filled with quiet joy. Outside the windows, snow was beginning to fall over Lake Geneva, creating a winter wonderland that seemed designed for new beginnings. "Has there been any word from—" Catherine started to ask, then stopped herself. "From Marcus?" Rebecca finished. "No, and there won't be. His parental rights were terminated last month. Threatening a pregnant woman violates the terms for maintaining custody, even from prison." It had been a difficult legal battle, but Sarah Coleman had argued successfully that Marcus posed a continuing danger to both Rebecca and the baby. The judge had agreed unanimously. "Eleanor will never have to worry about him," Rebecca continued, adjusting the baby in her arms. "She'll grow up knowing that her mother chose her safety over everything else." A soft knock interrupted them. A nurse entered with a large bouquet of flowers. "These just arrived," she said with a smile. "From London." Rebecca read the card aloud. "For Rebecca and Eleanor, with love and gratitude. You showed me what courage looks like. Linda Patterson, LLM graduate, Cambridge University." More flowers had arrived throughout the day, from David Morrison, who was rebuilding his life as an ethical business consultant, from Sarah Mitchell, whose support group now helped dozens of women process pregnancy loss due to domestic violence, from Margaret Wellington, who had become an unexpected ally and grandmother figure. "The foundation sent something too," Jen said, retrieving a wrapped package from the corner. Inside was a silver picture frame engraved with the Harrison Foundation motto, "Strength through truth, safety through solidarity." The frame held a photo from Rebecca's UN speech, showing her at 7 months pregnant, speaking to an audience of international delegates. "For Eleanor," Rebecca read from the accompanying note, "so she always knows her mother changed the world before she was even born." Rebecca looked at the photo, then at her newborn daughter. In 6 months, the Harrison Foundation had helped 37 diplomatic family members escape abusive situations. They had established safe houses in 12 countries. They had trained over 200 embassy staff members to recognize signs of domestic violence. But more than that, they had changed the conversation. Diplomatic immunity was no longer seen as a tool for covering up crimes, but as a resource for protecting victims. "She's going to ask about her father someday," Catherine said gently. "And I'll tell her the truth," Rebecca replied, "that some people are broken in ways that can't be fixed, that recognizing danger is a survival skill, not a character flaw, that choosing safety over social expectations is always the right choice." Eleanor made a small sound, not quite a cry, but definitely an opinion. Rebecca smiled. "And I'll tell her that the most important thing is not who gave her life, but who protected it." Ambassador Harrison's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. He read it quickly, then looked up with satisfaction. "Marcus was denied parole consideration," he announced. "Again, the parole board cited ongoing psychological evaluations, showing no improvement in anger management or acceptance of responsibility." "Good," Rebecca said simply. She felt no vindictiveness, only relief. "How much longer?" 18 more years minimum. He'll be 53 when he's eligible for supervised release." Rebecca did the math quickly. Eleanor would be 18 by then, an adult, protected by time and distance and truth. By then, Eleanor will be starting college, she said, building her own life. Marcus Wellington will be a stranger who shares some DNA, but no connection to our family. Dr. Reeves, Rebecca's obstetrician, entered for the final examination. How are we feeling, mother and daughter? Strong, Rebecca said, and meant it. After the medical checks were complete and visiting hours ended, Rebecca found herself alone with Eleanor for the first time. The baby was sleeping peacefully, tiny chest rising and falling with perfect rhythm. I made you a promise before you were born, Rebecca whispered. I promised to choose your safety over everything else, to teach you that you deserve to be treated with respect, to show you what real love looks like. She paused, watching snowflakes dance outside the window. Real love doesn't come with fear. It doesn't require you to be smaller or quieter or more grateful than you naturally are. Real love celebrates your strength instead of demanding your weakness. Eleanor stirred slightly, as if processing this information. You're going to grow up surrounded by people who chose courage over comfort. Grandmother Rose, who left an abusive husband in 1942. Grandfather Thomas, who uses diplomatic power to protect instead of exploit. Grandmother Catherine, who built her own career before building our family. Rebecca adjusted the hospital blanket around Eleanor's shoulders. And me, your mother, who learned that breaking patterns is more important than keeping peace. That institutional power belongs to the people who will use it responsibly. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst behavior. A nurse passed by the door, checking on other patients. The hospital was quiet except for the usual sounds of new life beginning and healing happening. The Harrison Foundation will be your legacy too, Rebecca continued. By the time you're old enough to understand it, we'll have helped thousands of families. We'll have changed laws in dozens of countries. We'll have made it impossible for people like your biological father to operate in the shadows. Eleanor opened her eyes briefly, gray and serious and ancient-looking, the way newborns sometimes appeared. You're going to live in a world where women support each other instead of competing, where having resources means sharing them, where survival isn't something you do alone. Rebecca's phone lit up with a text message from Elena Vasquez, the Mexican diplomat's wife who had been the foundation's first client. Rebecca, I wanted you to know, I filed for divorce today. My husband's diplomatic posting has been revoked. I'm going home to Mexico City with my children, and I'm not afraid anymore. Thank you for showing me that escape was possible. Rebecca smiled, typing back a quick congratulations. In 6 months, Elena had transformed from a terrified woman, trapped in Belgium, to a confident single mother building a new life. The pattern that had trapped Rebecca's generation was breaking. The silence that had protected abusers was ending. The institutions that had enabled violence were becoming tools for justice instead. Your great-great-grandmother probably couldn't have imagined this, Rebecca said to Eleanor. A world where women can call for help and actually get it, where international law protects victims instead of perpetrators, where having a baby doesn't trap you in a dangerous marriage. Snow continued falling outside. Geneva was transforming into a winter wonderland, clean and white and full of possibility. You're going to grow up bilingual, Rebecca continued. English and French, but also the language of diplomacy, the language of international cooperation, the language of using power responsibly. Eleanor yawned, a tiny sound that somehow conveyed complete contentment. And if anyone ever tries to hurt you or control you or make you feel small, you'll know exactly what to do. You'll know that you come from a family of women who don't accept unacceptable behavior, who build institutions instead of tearing them down, who understand that real strength is protecting others, not dominating them. Rebecca looked at the photo from her UN speech again. 7 months pregnant, speaking truth to power, creating something meaningful from something terrible. Your father thought he was taking advantage of our family's connections, she said softly. Instead, he gave us a reason to use those connections for something important. He thought he was trapping me. Instead, he freed me to become who I was always supposed to be. Eleanor's breathing was deep, and even now, the sleep of someone who was completely safe, completely loved, completely protected. I promise you'll never have to wonder if you're valuable, Rebecca whispered. You'll never have to earn love by being less than you are. You'll never have to choose between your safety and someone else's comfort. The snow was getting heavier now, creating a white curtain between the hospital and the rest of the world. But inside this room, the future was bright and clear and full of promise. Rebecca Harrison Wellington was gone. In her place was Rebecca Harrison, single mother, foundation director, and living proof that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing you ever do. Marcus had wanted to own her. Instead, he had freed her to own herself. And now that strength would pass to Eleanor, who would never know what it felt like to be trapped by someone who claimed to love her. The cycle was broken. The pattern was changed. The future belonged to women who knew their worth and refused to settle for less. Rebecca closed her eyes and listened to her daughter breathing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, building a life as a single mother, growing the foundation, raising a child who would inherit both privilege and responsibility. But tonight, in this quiet room overlooking Lake Geneva, everything was perfect. Mother and daughter, safe and sound, ready to change the world. Outside, the snow continued falling, covering everything in pristine white. Inside, Eleanor Rose Harrison slept peacefully in her mother's arms, dreaming whatever dreams newborns dream, dreams of safety, dreams of love, dreams of a world where women like her mother made sure that women like her would never have to choose between dignity and survival. The fairy tale was over. The real story was just beginning, and it was going to be magnificent. If this story of transformation and justice resonated with you, hit that like button to help other people discover Rebecca's incredible journey. Share this with someone who needs to hear that escape is possible and strength can come from the darkest moments. And don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Your engagement helps these important stories reach the people who need them most.